to our special Play Attention webinar today. We are going to be talking about time management. I am your host, Amber, and I am excited to chat a little bit more about this today. Just a few things before we get started. We are recording this webinar, so after we get done today, we'll be sending that recording out to everyone that's registered. So if you have to hop off early, or if you want to share this with somebody, you will have that opportunity. A few other things, you'll notice down below on your toolbar that you have a chat box. At any time during the webinar today, if you have any questions, go ahead and type those in that chat box. I'll try to get to them as I see them, but I definitely will leave some time at the end for me to cover those questions for you. You'll also see a little icon down there where you can raise your hand. So occasionally I'm going to ask you some questions, and if that's something that you're familiar with or something you've experienced, you can go ahead and raise your hand, just trying to make it a little bit more interactive today as we go forward. If at any time you get bumped off the webinar, just go ahead and reconnect on that link that you connected to when we got started today. So again, thank you so much for being here today. My name is Amber. Just a little background about myself. I have spent the last almost 20 years now in secondary and post-secondary education, really helping individuals find that education plan that's going to work best for them. And Play Attention has really played an integral part about that. You know, today we're really going to be focusing on time management and really, you know, a lot of different areas about that. We will touch a little bit on Play Attention, but we're going to give you an opportunity. If you want to learn more about Play Attention, you will have that opportunity as well. So let's go ahead and get started. I know your time is really valuable. If for some reason you can't hear me, hopefully I haven't seen any chats come across saying that people can't hear me. So hopefully my sound is good, and we're going to go ahead and get started today. So late again, we're going to talk about practical ways to improve your time management skills. So the first thing I want to ask, and this is where that interaction comes into place. Who here struggles with being late? Raise your hand. And then, you know, if that is something that you're familiar with, go ahead and type in that chat box. What makes you late? And what have you tried to make yourself not be late? So I want to start out a little bit and knowing a little bit more about you, kind of what, if this is something that I'm seeing a lot of hands being raised that you struggle with being late, which would make sense of why you're here today when we're talking about this topic. But, you know, put in that chat box, what makes you late? What is something that causes that? Do you have hyper focus? Do you have a hard time just keeping your appointments organized? Do you have too much on your plate? And then what tools have you tried with either success or no success in trying to stay on that time that you're allotted? So I'm going to share some of those. So please feel free to continue to share that. And I'm going to share some with you. Anxiety. I think I have more time than I actually do. So that is really a great answer. And that brings a lot to light, is oftentimes maybe we're anxious about going somewhere, or maybe we're anxious about how we're going to perform when we go to that place. And so that can really cause us to delay, to procrastinate. But also sometimes we have almost like time blindness, where we don't really understand how much time we have and how much time it's going to take to either do that task or even to get to where we need to be. Thank you for sharing. Distraction. So that is another thing that we hear a lot about. You get distracted about a lot of different things. It might be a noise, it might be an activity, but having that distraction. I am a time sufferer. I try to do too many things in a short period of time. So we're going to talk about that. It's almost like multitasking. And, you know, we've been told for many, many years that multitasking is a great skill, but we're learning more and more that it actually is not. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. Thank you for sharing. Someone mentions a brain injury, and that is one thing we're going to get into today when we talk about executive function. So thank you for sharing. To focus on what I'm working on and not taking travel time into consideration. That is a great answer. And a lot of what we hear when we talk about individuals that struggle with this skill is that hyper focus, where if it's something I enjoy, if it's something I'm very passionate about, I have that ability to hyper focus in on it. And then I almost, again, have that time blindness where I lose track of time. And then when I place out my appointments for the day, I'm thinking, okay, my appointment's at 9:30, but I didn't take into consideration that I have a 30-minute commute. And at 9 o'clock in the morning, I might hit traffic. So that's a great answer. Thank you for sharing. Forgetting appointments or doing too many things just before I leave. Trying to set a timer, but with no luck. Concept of time. Other folks not ready to go. That is a great one. I know when I talk with moms and dads, parents in general, guardians, caregivers, sometimes that's our biggest struggle, right? We are okay with our time management, but we're responsible for someone who might be struggling with that time management. And then we don't consider that when we're trying to go. So the tips that we're going to talk about today are going to be effective for both adults and children, something that definitely can be put into place. Let's see here. I've tried setting alarms, to-do lists, planners. We're going to talk about why sometimes those don't work for us. Too many responsibilities, commitments. I've tried to set my clocks ahead. I'm always late and the cause is procrastination, and I'm lazy too. And sometimes people put that tag of lazy on it, but honestly, it's because you need to build that skill of time management. It's not that we're lazy, it's that we struggle with that skill. Just like learning to tie your shoe, just like riding a bike, we have to build that skill, and we're going to talk about that today. So there's a bunch more here that I'm not going to be able to get to today, but thank you so much for sharing those. That really helps us start to think about this topic really in that broad sense that there's not a one size fits all. Everybody struggles with time management a little bit differently, but how can we work on building that skill, and what things can we put into place to really help us move forward? So what we're going to be talking, first, before our agenda, but why does it happen? I think that's the question that we want to get to today. Why does it happen? What happens in our brain that makes it very, very difficult for us to be on time, for us to not hyper-focus, for those tools that are in place, the calendar, the timers, the different things that are in place, why are those not effective for me? Why does that happen? So that's the question that we're going to answer today. And in our agenda now, I jumped one too far ahead, is executive function. So the very first thing we're going to talk about today is executive function. And I'm going to put a definition and some terms behind executive function for those that are unfamiliar with that term. We're going to talk about relation between time management and executive function. How do those two correlate together? We're going to talk about why certain tools might not work for you, what play attention's role is in this whole concept of time management. And finally, I'm going to provide you with some tips that you can start using today. Let me just make sure here. I thought maybe I had a question, but we're okay as we go forward. Remember, if you do have any questions, don't hesitate to put those in that chat box. Do my best to get to those, but again, I will cover that those questions at the end for sure if I don't get to your question. So what is executive function? So let's go back to the hand raising. I'm going to lower all of your hands. And so if executive function is a term that you're familiar with, that you've heard about before, go ahead and raise your hand. I just kind of want to get if you don't know, that's okay. We're going to talk about it, but I just kind of want to get an idea as we're working here today, who is familiar with that term? And it looks like today about a quarter of you today are familiar with that term. And really, it's a mental set of skills that help us get things done. And so the easiest way that I can describe it, and what's easiest for me to really understand what executive function is you can think of it as like the CEO of your brain. It helps us plan, prioritize, organize. It helps us avoid procrastination. It helps us with sustained attention. It helps us with time management. It helps us with our ability to regulate our emotions. So those skills that we need every single day to be effective, not only to be effective as an adult, but be effective as a child as well. And so some of those mental skills that we're working on fall in initiation. So getting started, right? Shifting, moving from one thing to another. Task completion. Again, all of these areas are time management, these first three that I've talked about, and we're going to hit on those a little bit more. Emotional control. Working memory. That's really our ability to problem solve, to critically think, to take information in, process it, and come up with a solution. Self-monitoring, so making sure we're staying on track, making sure that what we're producing is what is necessary. Planning and organizing. So these are just a few of the areas that executive function, the different set of skills that go into executive function. There are different cognitive skills that we use, again, to be effective day in and day out. And the thing about executive function is we can be strong in some areas, but not in the other. It's not a one size fits all. Everybody's a little bit different, but it's a really important piece when we talk about time management, because time management is one of the cognitive skills that fall into executive function. So when we talk about executive function related to time management, and just so you know, I will be providing these slides at the end of the webinar. When we send that recording out to everyone, we'll include the slides as well. So you will have these, because there's a lot of great information in here that I don't want you to worry about having to take a lot of notes to make sure that you get that information. But executive function related to time management, as I mentioned, the skills: initiation, so that's getting started on something. So in terms of when I'm talking about time, when we struggle with initiation, that can often show up as procrastination. So who here struggles with procrastination? Regardless of what the reason is, if you struggle with procrastination, raise your hand. And I'm seeing a bunch of hands going up right now. And that is not uncommon, because one of the biggest areas that we struggle with time management is just getting started on the project, getting started on the thing. And there can be so many reasons behind that. It can be because I'm anxious about the project. It's because I have perfectionism, which sounds funny sometimes. Why would you procrastinate if you're a perfectionist? But really, when you think about the two pieces together, I'm afraid I'm not going to do it to the standard that I want. So if I just don't do it, I won't have that problem, right? So sometimes that's the case. Sometimes it's because we're getting distracted. Sometimes it's because our focus is somewhere else, right? So there's so many different reasons why we procrastinate. But when we procrastinate, we have the lack of that initiation cognitive skill that we need for that strong time management. Also, one of the areas of executive function is shift. And that's the ability to move freely from one task to another. So thinking of a child, so if you have a child doing an activity that they love, right? Maybe they're playing on their iPad, right? They're hyper-focused in, they love doing it, it's so much fun, and now it's time to put the iPad down and start getting ready for bed. Oftentimes, they will have some kind of emotional response. They will be very upset. It'll be really, really hard to get them off that, because they have the inability to shift from one task to another. That also falls under time management, as well as that executive function piece. Additionally, as an adult, we can suffer the same thing. So maybe I'm very interested in my genealogy, right? So I'm on ancestry.com and I'm looking at all the different leaves that are popping up, and I'm very excited, and 1 o'clock goes by and I miss an appointment. 2 o'clock goes by, I miss another appointment. 3 o'clock goes by, and now I haven't gotten anything done that I needed to get done today, because I cannot shift from that one thing that I'm hyper-focused in to the things that absolutely need to be done. And it's really, when we get into the time management, it's not that you have the inability to do things, it's when things become mundane, tedious, repetitive, those little day-to-day tasks that aren't that fun and exciting thing, that's where we start to struggle. So shift is another area. And then task completion. And task completion is exactly what it sounds like. I start a million things, but I don't finish any of them. I start a million things and I only get half of them done. I get really, really excited when I get started on a task, and about, halfway through, a quarter of the way through, I start to get bored, and it's really, really hard, because now that new exciting fun has worn off, and now I'm getting to the more tedious part of that task, and I'm unable to get through that. So now these tasks are being left undone. So when we talk about how executive function relates to time management, those areas directly relate to that time management and are necessary for us to have strong time management skills and also to have that strong executive function. We need to improve our cognitive skills of task initiation, task shifting, task completion to lay the foundation for that strong executive function. When we develop effective time, when we develop effective time management skills. So having that foundation of that, laying that foundation of that strong executive function allows us to lay on top of that the skill of strong time management. And we're going to get into that, but that's why often the tools that are out on the market aren't always effective for us, because if we're struggling with weak executive function, we can put a lot of tools into it, but we do not have that skill. And no one is born with strong executive function. As a matter of fact, we know that many diagnoses such as ADHD, ADD, ODD, autism are all comorbid with weak executive function. And so that's why we see it show up more often when individuals are struggling with a diagnosis. They also are struggling with that weak executive function. But we're all born with the potential for strong executive function. Executive function skills can be taught and strengthened. So that is the great thing when we start talking about it. You know, even if you feel like I have tried everything in the book, I cannot be on time, that's just who I am. That's not true. You just have not built the skills yet to have strong time management. You have to build those skills. You know, when we look back, and we're going to talk about this here in a minute, but when we learn skills, we start at the beginning and we build those skills and we create permanency with them. And that's what we need to do with time management as well. We need to be able to build that skill so we can start moving forward. So how do we do that, right? How do we do that? Why do certain tools not work? So we're going to talk in a minute about how we do that, but we're also going to talk right now about why those tools don't work. And I alluded to it partially before by the fact that we have not built those skills. So time management is a skill that needs to be developed, like riding your bike or tying your shoe. And I'd like to use those two things as examples because you usually at least know one of them, right? You've learned to tie your shoe, you've learned to ride a bike. It's something that we do when we're younger. Sometimes we learn when we're older, and that's okay. And that's the great thing about our brains. Our brains have neuroplasticity in them, and that means they're moldable and shapeable, and given any time in our life, regardless of our age, we can learn a new skill, whether it's riding our bike, if it's sailing a boat, if it's driving a car, or if it's time management. We can do that, but we have to have the right kind of skills. We have to have not the right kind of skills, we have to have the right kind of pieces in place to make sure that that training is effective for us. And one of the biggest things that we need to have in place is that ability to have that feedback, to make sure we're on the right track, to make sure things are working. And we want to use tools that are going to be effective. We want to give ourselves practice. And timers and calendars and organizers are not always that practical piece that we need for that feedback, because we have to do that cognitive development first. Those other things like a calendar, a planner, an organizer, those are tools that we use to help us be once we have that skill, right? Just like once we tie our shoes, we can do different things. We can double knot them then. Once we learn how to ride a bike, now we can start to, go on longer rides, and we can put new things on our bikes, or we can ride different types of bikes. And so we have to build first that ability to have that skill. And then I have a thing here, is it poor executive function if I knowingly procrastinate? That is, I don't want to say poor, it's weak executive function. And you may very well know that you're doing it. You may know, I'm sitting here, I'm procrastinating, I should be doing X, Y, and Z. And yes, that is weak executive function, that you may have a sense. You may have a sense that I'm always late. My memory is poor. I struggle socially, right? And those all fall into that executive function category. But just because you know it doesn't mean that you know how to do it yet, right? I can know that, I should really know how to speak a foreign language. but that's not going to necessarily push me into all of a sudden I can speak a foreign language, right? I still have to go through that training. I still have to build it. So great question. Is it true that it is a skill? Being patient with oneself and not expecting perfection is important. I agree 100%. Progress over perfection is always the case, right? And I'm not saying that you're going to be perfect, right? We're going to build the skill, and that doesn't mean we're going to be perfect. We are generally not perfect in anything that we do, but we can still build the skill, and we can still have a strong skill in time management. That doesn't mean that you might not accidentally be late for something because you didn't take something into consideration, or that you didn't you did two appointments back to back and you didn't leave yourself enough time. That is still going to happen, right? But we want to build the skills so we're not having it constantly happening. We know how to put those tools in place to help us be more effective as we move forward. And yes, patience, when we talk about patience, that's a really important piece, looking at that emotional control and that mental flexibility. So parts of our executive function also include that ability to regulate our emotions. So not getting overly frustrated, not getting overly upset when something doesn't go exactly as we expect it, which you could say is patience, as well as having that mental flexibility where if I have to pivot, I have that ability to do it. So great question. Thank you so much for sharing that. So we need to first, before we put all of these pieces in place of the timer and a new calendar and an organizer and all of those different pieces, we first have to build the cognitive skill of initiation. We have to build the cognitive skill of shift. We have to build the cognitive skill of task completion, okay? So how do we improve that? What do we do? What things are out there that help me provide that? So there are a few things. When we're talking about executive function, play attention training. We're talking a little bit about play attention, just a little brief snack about play attention. You can learn more. There's opportunities for you to learn more if you're still interested, but we'll talk a little bit about that. But play attention specifically does cognitive training so that you can not only build your time management, but maybe some of those other areas that you might be struggling with. We also have an Executive Function 101 course that works specifically on different areas of executive function through doing different types of activities that start to build that process as we go forward. And we hit on mental flexibility, time management, organization, impulse control, and so there's a lot of different areas. So, if you want to learn more about our executive functions course, it's been a 5-week course. We're just starting to wrap it up, but all the material, it's all self-taught. We provide you the information, some webinars, some ebooks, some projects, some different things, but all of it is still available for you. So if you're interested in still getting access to that executive function course, if you type in executive function course, we will send you the information on how you can get, you just go ahead and log on to that and you can have access to that. But additional strategies that we can use at home, work, and school, okay? So yes, we wanna do cognitive training. Yes, we wanna start to build that ability, but I know you wanna know, Amber, today, what can I do? Are there things that I can do today to help me build that? And there are, and we're going to talk about those. Now, again, at the end of the day, building that strong executive function through cognitive training is going to be most effective for you, but that doesn't mean there aren't things that we can start doing and moving forward. Rebecca, yes, I will send you details on the course. So again, if you're interested in just knowing more about it, looking at the information, just type in executive functions course. We will send you an email when we're done today, and we'll make sure that you have all of the information that you need on that. So what do we need to do? Number one, we need to build skills. And why do we need to build skills? Because again, like I said, our brains have neuroplasticity in them. They're moldable and shapeable. And every time we learn a new skill, our brain builds a new neural network or neural pathway. And depending on how long we do that training depends on if we have permanency. So when we have permanency, that's where I can tie my shoe, and I do it with almost second nature. I don't even think about it. I just do it, right? Because I've learned it and I've learned that skill with permanency. And generally speaking, unless I have an injury to my brain, I'm always going to remember how to do that. Walking, running, even driving a car for some individuals. Now, obviously, we still have to pay attention and things have to happen, but being able to do that skill, riding a bike, For some individuals, a foreign language is something that they've created with permanency. They're bilingual or trilingual, where they've gone through that training and they've built that skill with permanency. Now, there's some of us that don't have a foreign language fluency, and we've either not done enough time or we haven't gotten the right feedback, immersed ourselves the way that we needed to. So our neural pathway is not permanent like someone else's. But every time we learn something new, we start to create that pathway. And that's what we want to do in play attention. And that's what we do when we build these executive function skills, whether it's the root foundation of attention, because I have to be able to pay attention to be able to have strong time management, to be able to be organized, to be able to have strong memory retention. I have to be able to pay attention to what's happening around us. And so that's what play attention is rooted in. And we provide you with the skill building that you need to create those permanent pathways in your brain. And so you can learn attention, you can learn time management, you can learn memory, impulse control, all of those different areas with permanency, where you have that skill and you can rely on that skill for the rest of your life. So, oops, sorry, I went one too far. So what does play attention do? Why play attention? What is that going to do besides a skill building program to help me? Well, it's a customized program. There's not a one size fits all. We look at everybody, we look at their skills, we have an assessment process to look at where you need to be strengthened. Because even if whether I'm working with somebody with ADHD or somebody that does not have ADHD, they're two different people. And even if I had two individuals, both with ADHD, they would still present very differently. We know there's not a one size fits all. So that's what's important to us here at Play Attention, where we're going to create a customized program that uses NASA-inspired technology integrated with cognitive skill building and behavioral shaping. So we use all the tools necessary to not only build those skills, but build those skills with permanency. So what does that look like? And again, I'm giving you just a little snack today about play attention, but we'll have the opportunity for you to either work with an individual to learn more or to attend a webinar to learn more. We provide lots of information on, kind of what does it look like. But these are the three different pieces of play attention. Again, it's integrated together to really build those executive function skills for you. And so number one is our NASA-inspired neurotechnology. This is what's going to give you feedback in the real moment, in the current moment of your attention. Again, everything we do at Play Attention is rooted in attention, and that is that foundational skill that we need to build the other ones. So we're going to build that foundation, and then we're going to start to add other ones in. Now, through electrodermal potential, Play Attention is actually able, this body wave armband is able to pick up brain activity indicative of attention. So the reason why that's important is because when somebody's wearing it and doing their training, all of the games they're going to be playing, all of the different cognitive skill games are going to be triggered by their attention. So just thinking back to skills that you've learned that you did hands-on training, you're going to be more effective, like tying your shoe and riding a bike. Now you can see your attention in real time. Now you can work on your time management in real time. Now you can work on your memory in real time. So you're getting that immediate feedback of your attention. When you're paying attention, you get your character, your game to operate the way that you want. But at any time, if you lose your attention, the game either freezes or the character goes the opposite way. And so now we're giving you a platform, not only of seeing your attention and your cognitive skills in real time, but now you also have a place where you can have very deliberate practice. So you can actually have a platform to practice these skills and start to build them. We also have a behavioral shaping component that goes in to help us work on that self-regulation. Oftentimes when we're struggling with executive function, we also have some of those self-distracting behaviors, the fidgets, the getting easily frustrated, humming, chewing on things, different things that come up because we're struggling with that impulse control, and really helping you build that self-regulation so you can stop that behavior before it actually happens. And that way you can stay engaged and focused, and you can have those strong executive function skills. So that's just a little bit about play attention. There's a lot more that we can talk about that, and we'll give you the opportunity, if you're interested in learning a little bit more, you can work with a representative or attend one of our webinars that's coming up in the future. But now you're probably thinking, well, that's great, Amber, but what can I do today, right? I came to this webinar. I want to learn tools that I can use today. And so we're going to provide you with some additional things that you can start using today. Again, at the end of the day, we do want to build those skills, but these are things that might help you start moving. Instead of just saying, oh, I've got a calendar, there's things that we need to do behind the scenes with that calendar to really make them effective. So I'm going to put them all on the screen, but then I'm going to go on each one individually and talk a little bit about how to do each of those. Because again, when we're talking about it, if we just put it out there, we need some context behind it, right? We look at these skills online and we're like, great, yeah, use a calendar, use a schedule, but how is that going to be effective for me? I've used it, done it, 10 times, and it hasn't worked for 10 times. So here are some things that you can incorporate in addition to those types of tools that should help start to lead you in the direction that you want to go. Number one, how is your current time allotted? Now, again, I'm going to go through the list and then I am going to I'm going to go through and we're going to talk about each one of these individually. So how is your time allotted? Number two, how is your time prioritized? You need to stick to a routine. Prep for your day when you can. Take breaks. Unplug. Don't multitask. Use transitions, and ask for help. Okay, so we're going to talk about each one of these as we go through. But number one is keep track of your time. So what is your current time being used? I think that's one of the biggest things when we struggle with time management is we really have a misconception of what we are putting into our day and what that time really should take, right? We have a misconception in our mind that, oh, that task only takes 20 minutes. Oh, that task only takes 30 minutes. Oh, I can get right over to that 2 o'clock appointment. But we're not really taking in consideration all of the things that are required from us in our day. So we want you to take a log. And this is something that you can do over a couple days, you can do over a week, a couple weeks, depending on kind of what that looks like for you. If your schedule is pretty routine and it kind of sticks to the same kind of thing as you go along, then a couple days is going to be okay. But if you have some big, dips and valleys in your schedule, then you might want to take a look at this log a little bit longer. Because number one, before we do anything, before we make any changes, we need to collect data and we need to track so we can see where some of those deficits are happening, right? So number one, write down all of the tasks that are required of you, all of your appointments that you need to go to, all of your meetings, all of your responsibilities. So I want you to take inventory of everything that you do day in and day out that requires your time. Okay, so just kind of do a brain dump. You get out a piece of paper and you just start writing all of the things down. If you need to, if you work outside of the home or even in the home, a lot of us are working at home now, but you can create a list. Okay, these are the things that are required for me at home. These are the things that are required for me for work, and maybe these are the things that are required for me from my volunteer group, my church, whatever the case may be, right? If it works best for you to categorize it, you can do that. But write down everything. And then log your daily time. Then I want you to go to each one of those tasks, each one of those appointments, and start putting time around it. Okay, what in your mind does it take for you to do that task? Does it take 20 minutes? Does it take 2 hours? What is that time that you're allotting to that task? Now I want you to put that aside and I want you to start logging your time. Like I said, for a few days, for a week, whatever that looks like for you, but start logging your time. I want you to log your time when you start something, when you get there, whether you're early, you're late, whatever the case may be. This is not meant to be a judgment exercise. This is informative, right? I think we talk about that a lot here at Play Attention, is when we are starting to learn the reasons behind some of the things, it's very, very quick, easy and quick for us to judge, oh, I did this wrong or I did that wrong. That's not what this exercise is for. This exercise is to open your eyes to the fact that maybe the time you're allotting is not the time that should be allotted, right? We didn't take in consideration driving. We didn't take into consideration for 10 minutes, we helped my toddler look for his shoes, right? We didn't take all of those pieces into consideration. And that's what logging your time is going to take into consideration. And so whether you do it for a couple days or you do it for a week, then I want you to take that first where you brain dumped all of the information, and I want you to take the real time that happened, and I want you to compare the two. And that's going to give you a better understanding of, number one, where you might be losing time. Number two, where you might have been wrong on the time that it took. It actually took you longer. It actually took you less. But it's going to start to open your eyes to areas where you need to address and figure out that's where I'm losing time. Iona, we will touch base with you. If you started working on the program years ago and you're interested in getting started again, we will get you back in touch with Mike. So no problem, no problem. So that's number one. I want you to look at all of your time. I want you to collect data. I want you to look at all of those pieces. Number two, and this really goes hand in hand with what you do in number one, but prioritize your time. So most likely what you're going to find in that information that you look at is that you're doing more than your day will allot. You're doing more than your week will allot. So you need to understand you're not able to do everything. And this goes into sometimes we have to say no to certain requests of our time, right? Sometimes, we think, I have to say yes, it's for this, or I have to say yes, it's for that. Sometimes we can't. And this is a really good exercise to see what you might be saying yes to that you may not really want to do. And I'm not saying you have to cut out all of your extracurriculars or not volunteer here and there, but you do really need to take inventory of your time, because oftentimes when we do this exercise, we see that there are more things happening than we're able to do in a day. And that's why we feel so frazzled. That's why we're rushing from thing to thing, because we are really having a hard time managing all of it. So look at how you're allotting your time and see what is necessary, what is important to you, what is fun, because it's important to have fun in our life as well, what's not as important, and what's not needed. So almost ranking it, right? Okay, I've done this, I do this, I do this, but these are the things that I can no longer do, or these are the things I need to start putting at the bottom of the list because it's something that's not going to fit in there. So another question, my daughter's always late, but I challenge that because there's too much on. Is there a difference between time management in kids and adults? I do think there's a difference in time management in kids and adults, just in the way that it's structured, because I often see that adults really start to see their deficiencies in time management when they become adults, because when we're kids, we have people in place that are helping guide us to where we need to be. That doesn't mean we're not going to turn assignments in late. That doesn't mean that we're not going to struggle to get distracted or things like that. But we generally have that structure in place that kind of loosely guides us where we need to be. And once we become an adult, that kind of goes away. And so a lot of times we see where it becomes really apparent as I'm an adult that I'm struggling with that time management because now I have nobody to guide me. Yes, I might have a boss that says I need to do X, Y, and Z, but I could still lose my job if I didn't follow that, right? I'm still kind of that guiding force. So I do think it shows up differently between the two of them. And so at the end of the day, we need to build that skill for them. And that's why Play Attention really focuses on a lot of different areas to ensure that we're customizing it best for that individual, because she might struggle with procrastination, but once she finally gets started on it, she can get that task done like that, right? She might be able to get started on the task, but now she gets bored during it and then she never gets it done. So there are a lot of different areas that shows up. And that's why we look at those different pieces as we go along. And some of these things are going to be really effective for you in some cases, and some might not be. Again, because there's not a one size fits all. So great question. Thank you. So number 3, we need to try to stick to a routine. And I know that's really hard. Right now, our world, it seems like every time we turn around, some changes are being made and our routine has been really struggling. I talk to a lot of families that they've gone from virtual school to hybrid to back to virtual. Now they're full time in the classroom, and there's a lot going on. Same with adults working. Maybe they had a furlough and maybe they work from home, they're back. And so it's very, very hard right now for us to have a routine. But the more we can build that routine, the stronger it's going to get. But here's sometimes where we struggle with routine. We try to do too much too fast, right? We try to implement all of the things at one time and it becomes overwhelming and it's really hard to do. So maybe we start with our morning routine. Okay, we want to do these 3 things every single morning. Or we start with bedtime routine. We want to do these 3 things every evening and find that balance first and start to build that skill and then expand it, right? We have to build that habit and that skill first, and then we can expand it. But that's one thing when we talk about goals and habits, especially as adults, where we really struggle with that because we, again, do too much at one time and we can't sustain that. And so really being able to start in a small area and then build from there. Jenny, yes, you will get a recording. Everyone that's registered will be sending this recording out after the webinar is over. So number 4, prep your day. So one really simple thing to do is prep your day before you start every single day. And you can do it by making your lunches the night before. I know for me, every single night I set up my coffee pot. Every single night. That way, all I have to do in the morning is hit the button and turn it on. And I know that's already done. I don't have to mess with it. Does it save me a whole lot of time? No, but it's a mental thing that's one less thing that I have to worry about putting my mental energy in the morning. And so that's something I do every night. Right now, my children and myself, we're all home virtual, doing school, doing work virtual. So lunches aren't as big of a deal right now because everybody's home for lunch. But prior to that, when they were going to school, I was going to the office, everyone made their lunches the night before. Because again, that's one less thing that you have to do in the morning when maybe you're a little bit rushed or something happens, or just putting that mental energy into it, it's already done. Set up your bag the night before. So if you're going to go to the gym, if you just need to, if you bring your laptop home every night, or your students with their backpacks, get everything done the night before, put it in one place, make sure it has a place to live, and then it's going to have that, and that's already done. Again, you're not running all over the place, like where's the backpack at? What happened with that? It's all right there ready for you to go. Another area for our adults is, and you could even do this with kids as well, especially if they're doing homeschool or virtual school right now, is make a priority list the day before. So at the end of my day, I like to put a few things down like that I absolutely need to get done the next day. X, Y, and Z absolutely needs to be done. These are a few things that I've got hanging out there. I'd like to work on them. If I don't get them done, that's okay, but I need them to be on my list and on my mind. And that way I can put it all down there. I can let it go for the night, and the next day when I come in, I have that list ready to go. Now, that doesn't mean there's, I understand, I'm very familiar with work. That doesn't mean there's not going to be a fire that you're going to have to put out in the morning, but at least during that potential crisis mode, you're not forgetting all of the things that you wanted to touch that day because it's already written down and ready for you to go. If you struggle to remember things before you walk out the door, whether it's at work or at home, put a note on the front door. If you have a hard time remembering to grab your lunch, if you have a hard time remembering to grab this, grab that, put a note on the door or on the light switch. And that way, that's the last thing you see right before you walk out the door. I have a question. Are each of these task areas building new neural pathways? Yes. So when we learn a new skill, we're building a pathway for that skill. So great question. Take breaks. So this is so very important, whether we're working with an adult or working with a child. Breaks are essential and we're needed throughout the day. And this may mean every hour I stand up and stretch for 5 minutes. I walk outside for 5 minutes. I get up and I fill my water bottle. If I'm, if there's a kid in between their classes, they're going to kind of get some activity. And if they're going to school right now, they're going to get some breaks with recess and things like that. But it's very, very important for us to take breaks, because when we get too much on our mind, too much going on, anxiety, stress, we need to just kind of recenter ourselves, and that's what a break is going to do for us. So it's really important to incorporate that in. So as we look at all of our time, as we start to create a routine, it's important that we fill those breaks in. Okay, from 10 to 10, 15, I am taking, I am away. I'm taking my break. There's nothing that can be scheduled in that time. I am going to go outside and get fresh air or whatever the case may be. But that's really important. And as a time management skill, most of the time, it's going to be most effective if we schedule that time into our day, because it's very easy for us to just get sidetracked on something and totally forget about that. Unplug. So one time management suck, if you will, is electronics, right? And so many of you talked about in the beginning of getting sucked into something and losing track of time. And many times it's technology based. And that's because technology has that ability to give us that hyper focus. It's very fast, lots of things are going on, and we can easily move from thing to thing to thing. And we almost can get like stuck in the, the spider web. We start going down that hole and we go and we're all the way somewhere else in a matter of 10 or 15 minutes because technology so much is there for us. And so it's important for us to unplug. And that might mean to close your email for a certain period of time during the day. Okay, I'm going to close my email from this time to this time. It might mean that I am going to delete my social media apps off of my phone so that I don't have that temptation of opening them and getting sucked into that hole. If I'm working and I don't need my cell phone, maybe I leave my cell phone in the car or I leave my cell phone turned off. So just taking that time, and maybe it's, at work you need those things and it's okay, but then when you get home, you can say, okay, I'm not checking my email until the morning. Because so much of that is right there, it's very easy for us that to derail us. And it's very easy for us to have that time suck out of it because of that. And so I know one of the biggest things that I've heard from a lot of adults especially is to remove social media apps from your phone, because again, it's so easy for us to go in, and when you do your time log, you might be surprised at how many times you go in and check your email and check your text messages and check your social media. And when we start adding up that time, we're talking minutes and hours of time that we've lost because of that, almost like an addiction. And so being able to remove that so it's not so easily accessible helps us with some of that time management as we go forward. Yes, there is going to be a replay. We're going to be sending out that recording after the webinar is over. Paper is now attached to my iPod case. I write what I want to do so I don't forget, and then I don't have to do it now or when not appropriate. So writing things down, having that list of things, that way it's on your mind and then it's off onto your paper, that is not a bad solution either, having that ability to do that. So thank you for sharing that with us, Lori. Do not multitask. So for years and years and years, multitasking has almost been a badge of honor, right? I can multitask, I can do this, and it's the best way to function. But we're learning more and more through science that multitasking is not the way to go, because this is the easiest way that I can explain why it's not the easiest. Is number one, if I have one task that I'm working on and I only do that task, I'm putting 100% into that task. If I have 4 tasks and I'm doing all 4 of them at one time, at the most, one of my, all of my tasks are distributing that 100% amongst them. It might be equally, I might be doing 50% on one and 10 over here and 20 over here, or whatever the case may be. But as soon as I start taking my time and dividing it amongst multiple tasks, I'm no longer giving 100% to that task. And because of that, I'm more likely to make an error. I'm more likely to get sidetracked and not get it finished. I'm more likely to take more time to do it than if I just spent 100% on my time, boom, I'm done, now I can move to the next thing. So that's one thing, as we're learning more and more about time management, that multitasking is not effective for us in that time management realm. How does time management problems or effective management problems negatively impact long and short-term memory? So that's a great question. So long and short-term memory are another area of executive function. And a lot of times what is happening when we're struggling with long and short-term memory is we are moving so fast and we don't have that strong attentive state. And so we're not able to retain that information because our mind is going like this all of the time. And that can affect our memory, that affects our time management because we're not able to stay engaged, focused, and processed. So oftentimes we can see I have really poor time management and I have really poor memory because I'm struggling with impulse, lack of impulse control. I'm struggling with attention, struggling with processing speed. And that's where we really want to get to the bottom of what areas of your executive function are you struggling with the most. We have assessments that do that to really help determine, okay, I'm really struggling. And we have a computer assessment, and in that assessment, we track those different areas: memory, processing speed, impulse control. time management and really see how your brain works so that we're able to really find those areas that work best for you. We spend a lot of time on these aspects with our daughter. It doesn't ever seem to help. She's always late. What are we missing? We're missing the fact that she's not building that skill. So again, if you've tried every single one of these and you've broken things down for her and they're not working, she needs to build those cognitive skills. It's just like saying, well, we've tried this shoe and this shoe and this shoe, but she still can't learn how to tie her shoes because she's never learned to tie her shoe. She can't do it because she's never learned how to do it. And so she's at the point where she really needs to learn how to build that time management skill, and she needs cognitive training to do that. And that's an area that play attention helps with. Okay, transitions. So as we talk about transitions, sometimes these are effective for people. Sometimes you've tried these and they haven't worked. And if you've tried these and they haven't worked to help you shift from one thing to another, again, that's where we need to backtrack and start to build those skills. But transition is something that we use to move from one thing to another, to prepare ourselves to move from one thing to another. Again, it can be timers, can be specific words. For children, it can be songs. Simon says there's a lot of different ways to kind of implement, okay, when we move from task A to task B, I'm going to start singing the song. We're going to have 2 minutes to do that. It's very common you see in lower level elementary classes that teachers will use to transition their students from one thing to another. But if we do not have that skill to shift from one thing to another, you're going to often see that emotional outburst. They're either very frustrated, they're very upset, they might start crying, they might have a tantrum, and because they're unable to process that and they're unable to shift, and that's where that cognitive training comes in to help them. And then finally, the very last one that I have on my list is ask for help. And so this is where we might look at all the things on our list and say, well, no wonder why I'm late or I can't get these things done. There's more things than I need to do in a day. And this can be whether we have partners that we can ask to help distribute some of this, our coworkers, our employers, our family members, but asking for help when we try to take everything on, sometimes we need to deliver that back out. And I think that's a really important piece when we're talking about time management. To be able to have that effectiveness, we have to know what we are capable of and what we aren't, and then asking for help as we move forward. And whether that's help by getting training, coaching, taking some of the things off our plates, but really asking for that help. So the last few things that I want to touch on here, and then I've got a few questions I will address, but time management is a vital executive function skill that we need for everyday productivity and success. However, we need to learn how to do that. We have to manage time. We have to learn how to build that cognitive skill. So again, as I go back to what I talked about before with play attention, we do have cognitive training to help individuals build time management, as well as many other areas of executive function. Again, we address attention, impulse control, processing speed, emotional regulation, social skills, memory. We have several different areas of memory we can focus on, coordination. So all of those different cognitive skills go in to lay the foundation of that strong executive function that is necessary for every day. And so if you're interested in learning more about how play attention can help you or help your child or help your spouse or whatever that looks like for you, your patients, whatever, you can always call our 1-800 number, though we are working virtually, and so sometimes there's a little bit of a delay reaching someone. You can always visit our website, but if you're interested in talking a little bit more about play attention and kind of finding out what that customized training plan would look like specifically and get those details, all you have to do is type in consult in the chat box. One of our representatives will reach out to you, type in consult and your phone number. They'll reach out to you. They will schedule a time to talk about play attention that's convenient for you and just give you all of the information so now you have it, and then you can make a decision on what works best for you, your family, whatever that looks like. So if you're interested in that, all of our consultations are free, and we've been doing this for a long time. Play attention's been on the market for 26 years. So we've been around for a long time, so we're very familiar with working with individuals that are looking to build their executive function. Okay, so questions. I know I've got some on my chat box, so let me scroll up and look at those questions. Go ahead and keep typing your questions in. Again, if you're interested in a consultation, type that in. If you're interested in that executive function one-on-one course, go ahead and type that in. Remember, in about an hour or so, we'll be sending an email out. In that email will be the recording of today's webinar along with the slides that you saw today. So you'll have those. So let's see, what do we see here? A fear of concern is taking the initiative to pick up the armband and start using it and using it consistently. How do we get around these first steps? Great question. We provide coaching. When you start with Play Attention, you will be assigned an executive functions coach. That's an individual that's going to help you with your assessment. They're going to help you set up the training plan that's going to work best for you. They're going to, once you get your equipment, they're going to help you set it up, make sure you're completely comfortable using it, and then they're there to support you as you go through the program. So oftentimes, especially when we're working with adults, consistency is the biggest fear, the biggest struggle. Just like if I bought exercise equipment, if I never use it, it's not going to be effective. It's the same thing with Play Attention. We have to be consistent. We have to be using it for it to be effective. And that's what your coach is there for. So many times our adult clients especially need that extra support to make sure they're staying on track, to make sure things are working well. And so what does that look like? So a lot of our adults will have a setup appointment over the phone, Skype, Zoom, WhatsApp, whatever platform they want to use, but they will reach out once a week to talk about Play Attention, to make sure they're on track. That can be at the beginning of the week to set you up for success that week. It can be in the middle of the week to make sure that you are on track, or the end of the week if you feel like, yes, I can do it, but by the end of the week, I want some feedback. That's really up to you. It's between you and your coach. You set up that schedule, but coaching is an integral part of this process because you do need that support as you go through that process. So great question. Could you give some suggestions on transitions for adults with ADHD? How can we schedule an appointment, both my son and I? Okay, so I will reach out to you. Thank you for giving me your phone number. I'll reach out to you about the assessment piece, and so we'll talk about that. But really, when we talk about transitions for adults with ADHD, really the transitions that are out there are alarms, timers, and things like that. But again, oftentimes they don't work with adults because, especially if you're struggling with ADHD, because we know almost always it's comorbid with that weak executive function. And so because you don't have the skill to move from one task to another, or you struggle with that hyper focus where you get involved in something and you can't get off, really that's where we need that cognitive skill building to build that ability. And so one of the exercises that we have, one of the cognitive skills is time on task. And time on task is specifically designed to build that time management skill. So great question. I'll reach out to you about the assessment. Executive function course, I will reach out. Let's see here. How does one come back on multitasking when many jobs require employees to check email, phone messages after the end of work days? Laura, that is a fabulous question. And my answer would be, number one, I want you to do step one and log your time, right? Put everything, all the tasks down that you're required, right? All of those tasks that you're required to do. And I want you to then do that exercise where you log your time. And if that means you're checking emails at night, you're doing this, you're doing this, you're doing this, I want you to log all of that down. And then I want you to look again and prioritize your time. Now, obviously, as an employee, if that's a requirement that is given to you, that needs to be something that you're going to address, right? But then maybe we need to ask for help. And maybe if we're spending 2, 3, 4 hours after our workday, that's that conversation that we can have with our employer that says, okay, I've logged my time for the last week, and I noticed that my efficiency is down because I'm doing X, Y, and Z, right? Is there any way that we can make an adjustment on that? Or something like that. So that's one way I would start with that, because that is difficult. Years ago as an employee, once you left for the day, your day was over, right? Unless somebody called you, maybe you were on call or something. And now we are so connected. I mean, I know I have my work on my phone. I have, every way, instant message, email, text message, all of those different pieces. And it's really hard sometimes if we are a type A person, or if we're always wanting to go a million miles an hour, sometimes it's hard to stop that, and it's hard to be that. But I know when I multitask in the evening, sometimes I'm not as effective as if I just set specific times to do that. And so that's something to just look at how that's being used and have that conversation with your employer. That would be my recommendation for that. Okay, I have someone that's interested in getting back in the saddle with their play attention. And so we will reach out and ensure that we get you connected with your coach. Now I see a lot of individuals are interested in that executive function as well as potentially a consult. So we will reach out to all of you. I appreciate everyone being here today. I know your time is very valuable. Obviously, we've talked about time management. So taking a little bit of time out today and learning a little bit more about it, we greatly appreciate it here at Play Attention. If you requested our assistance, we will be reaching out to you again, probably in the next hour or so. You'll be receiving an email with the follow-up recording of this webinar, as well as the slides are attached. If you don't see that in the next little bit of time, you might want to check your spam folder. Sometimes that happens, unfortunately. So thank you again for being with us today, and we look forward to working with you in the future. Thanks so much. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.